HubSpot makes impossible growth impossibly easy for their customers. And here's the perfect example. Morehouse College needed to reach new students with fresh, engaging content. But with a massive 900-page website, even the tiniest updates took 30 minutes to publish. Breeze, HubSpot's collection of AI tools, helped them write and optimize their content in a fraction of the time. The results? 30% more page views, and visitors now spend 27% more time on their site. If you're ready for impossible growth like this, you can visit HubSpot.com.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, July 10th. I'm Mark Dent here with Ben Berkley, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Today, we are talking about cheap cars, or actually the lack thereof. Inflation has driven up the price of nearly everything in the economy, of course, but brands and models of cars associated with entry-level prices have gone up particularly high, and there are a few major reasons behind this. We're going to get into all of that in a minute, but first, it's time for the business and tech news. Let's begin with Nvidia, because Wednesday was a really big day for every Wall Street trader's favorite stock. Nvidia soared in the morning, enough for its market cap to exceed $4 trillion for a little while. That's trillion with a T. And it's the first time that any stock has been valued so high, surpassing Apple's old record of $3.9 trillion. It's the year 2025, and chips are clearly more popular than fruit. Next up, McDonald's is trying to spice it up by adding a new pepper sauce to its McMuffins this week. Also, the snack wrap returns to the menu permanently today, and it will cost you $2.99. Ben, are you a snack wrap fan?
I mean, I didn't have lunch today, so I'm going to say yes to any food. But I think what's interesting to me about this is it feels like a reminder that nothing in business is forever. You know, since it came around, fast food has always been known for being the cheap food option, like the so foundational ironclads, the certainty of life. And it didn't hold. These menus grew to be so not cheap that all these chains, notably McDonald's here, are going to great lengths to reestablish that reputation. And that's just a wild thing.
Yeah, and McDonald's in particular saw some very big price hikes, more so than even some of their fast food peers. I'll be honest, I had Chick-fil-A for lunch on Wednesday, and it was over $10 for a meal. And I just feel like $10 is like where I reach that boiling point. And so this snack wrap, I mean, I think $2.99 is just, it's the new bargain price, I think, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's stick with the sort of restaurant industry here and move on to Starbucks. As you may be aware, Starbucks has been trying to cut costs as part of its rebuilding plan under CEO Brian Niccol. And Restaurant Dive reported yesterday that Starbucks will offer executives as much as $6 million in stock bonuses if they're able to reach cost reduction goals by late 2027. In other words, they will shower executives with millions of dollars if they can cut millions of dollars from the company. We'll see how the math works out. Some other math really quick, or at least numbers that Restaurant Dive pointed out. The median Starbucks employee makes less than the federal poverty line for an individual. Some bad news came down on Wednesday also. That is, unless you're a fan of companies being really annoying with subscriptions. The FTC's click to cancel rule, which would have required companies to be transparent about terms, conditions, and subscription cancellations, which had been enacted in 2024, was nixed by federal judges who agreed with critics that the agency failed to conduct a proper analysis before making this ruling. Ben, you know, I was thinking of canceling some subscriptions in the coming weeks, and now it's like, well, I'm going to have to go to harder lengths for some of these because I know that there are a lot of newspapers, gyms, whatever out there who won't just let me click online and do it.
This is going to just add a little bit of time and potentially a lot of time for those who are less savvy at navigating the weird canals of a website. But I think one prediction here, I think credit card companies are not going to like this prediction. I would say disputed charges will rise out of this because people are going to find these recurring fees on their statements and struggling to get out of them. That's going to be their recourse.
Yeah, could definitely be some reverberation here. But in the meantime, Planet Fitness can rejoice at least for a bit longer. But to balance that out, there is some kind of cool news out there. Expansio, an extended reality startup out of Dubai, has raised a hefty $250 million at a $1.35 billion valuation to fuel the development of sci-fi contact lenses. Yes, this is a thing. They are smart contacts under development that would essentially pack night vision goggles, binoculars, and real-time health monitoring right onto your eyeballs. Ben, have you pre-ordered these yet?
I mean, I would. They're getting a lot of funding, so clearly people are seeing something that's real. But as Bloomberg noted, there's a pretty big commercial hurdle here. They need to really shrink things down. The technology, the power source is going to need to get down to something that actually fits in the eye. It kind of loses some power if you're having to charge your contact lens every 10 minutes.
Right. And no idea if this will turn out. As you mentioned, there are myriad issues at hand here. But nevertheless, props to Expansio for coming up with a product that actually feels like the future, that would have been in Back to the Future. And finally, according to Adobe, Amazon's Prime Day event is expected to hit $23.8 billion across U.S. retailers. That's up 28% year over year, and is also the equivalent of 2 Black Fridays, given that online shoppers dropped $10.8 billion on that sales event last year. But maybe it's not really all that impressive, seeing as Black Friday is 1 day and Prime Day is now 4 days.
Hey everybody, I've been listening to this great podcast lately. It's called Latinx in Power, hosted by Thaisa Fernandez, and it's brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. So Latinx in Power is a podcast that features interviews with top-level executives, entrepreneurs, and innovators from Latin America, aiming to demystify the tech industry by providing listeners with an insider perspective and insights from Latin American leaders who have succeeded in their fields. A lot of great episodes on this one. My personal favorite recently was an episode with Isabel Alvarez, who is a graphic designer that designs cookbooks. She has 15 years of experience blending editorial design, branding, and experiential design. She really views design as a catalyst for meaningful social change, so I think this is a great episode to get you going with this show. You can listen to Latinx in Power wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, let's move on to the main story. I wrote not too long ago about cheap cars that are actually not cheap anymore. Ben, why don't you just lead us a little bit here in this conversation?
For sure. So I would say we're talking about ultimately the extinction of the $25,000 vehicle, which is a death that really rocked me as someone who recently shot for a new car. But to put this in context, in 2019, nearly a quarter of all new auto sales in the US were under 25K. Earlier this year in February, Edmunds logged that number at only 4.8% of car sales in the US. So Mark, obviously, as you said, you reported in depth about this phasing out of vehicular affordability. What gives? What's driving it?
Yeah, so it's that big picture stat would suggest potentially that cars overall are just expensive. And while that is true, I went a little further into the data and got some data from Kelley Blue Book, and it just gets a little bit crazy because it's the cheap cars that are getting expensive. It's the subcompact cars, mid-level cars, compact cars, smaller trucks. Those have seen the highest price increases, as have brands like Kia and Hyundai, Toyota, Dodge. These brands that are a bit more associated with thrift are the ones that saw the highest price increases. For instance, if you look at the overall inflation in the vehicle market from 2019 to 2025, the industry average is about 29%, but Hyundai's prices have gone up 48%. Kias have gone up 36%, Dodge's 44%. Meanwhile, if you look at luxury brands like Jaguar, Audi, Porsche, they're all well below inflation to the extent that a Jaguar now is cheaper than it was in 2019 if you account for inflation.
There's a big addressable market here. Are these automakers kind of leaving money on the table as they're exiting this cheaper car land? Or is it just it doesn't matter because these luxury vehicles are so much more profitable?
Basically the latter. They are much more profitable. The manufacturers would far rather sell a good number of pricey nice vehicles instead of a huge number of cheaper vehicles because the margins are that much higher. And, margins in the automotive industry are pretty much a well-guarded secret, according to a couple of analysts who I spoke with. But, there is information that trickles out here and there. And you're talking about, for instance, on like the Ford F-150, which is Ford's, best-selling vehicle by far. It's a truck that can cost anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000 and even well into the $90,000s if you want to go, all the way. And, they get something like maybe 20% margins on that. Whereas if you're talking about one of their less expensive trucks, like the Maverick, it's just a much smaller profit margin. So there's no incentive to sell cheap cars as long as you can sell enough more expensive ones.
This seems like a US specific phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
I was recently reading about BYD in China. They're putting an EV out priced around like $8,000 equivalent here on the market. That sounds pretty nice to me. I don't expect we're going to be seeing that in the States. You have any sense of why that would be the case?
Well, BYD obviously has its own reasons, which is that basically the imports are more or less impossible here, and they wouldn't be so cheap if they were imported here. So that is certainly one reason. But in foreign markets, you'll see that there are cars that have been discontinued in the US, either by US automakers or by foreign automakers that still sell those models overseas because people are still buying them there, I guess. And it comes down to this in some ways. The American automakers especially have decided that they don't want to sell cheap cars anymore. And there's also another thing involved, particularly if you compare the US to Europe, is that there's the dealer model here that you really don't have in Europe. People just pre-order their cars online there. And whereas here, people go to the dealer and they buy whatever they get. So the dealers can just stock these either more expensive cars or like more expensive trim levels, i.e. detail levels, whether that's cameras, nice leather seats, heated seats, whatever. They'll only have those types of vehicles available on their lot. So people just buy them. And, they have been buying them at the end of the day. Consumers are buying these more expensive cars for the most part over the last few years.
I mean, that's the thing about your story that really caught me is, the entire purpose of reading anything on the internet is to get mad about something and identify who to be mad at and then rake them over the coals. That's like the sport of our times. But in reading this, there's no easy place to lay the blame here because automakers are serving their shareholders as they must, and dealerships are just trying to exist as they should. And then consumers, as you suggest, they're also to blame here.
Yeah, because they are buying these higher trim levels. One analyst I spoke to with Edmunds named Ivan Drury just kind of really emphasized this point that there is probably more demand for cheaper vehicles than is actually being provided. No question about that. But it's just not unusual for someone to want that higher trim level. If you look at a couple years ago, another Ford model, the Explorer, they had to release new higher trim versions in the middle of the year because they could not satiate the demand for these nicer, more expensive versions of the Explorer. Honda has actually eliminated for the 2025 year its lowest trim model of the Odyssey minivan. So it's the automakers and the dealers are clearly happy about this, but there's a mixture of who's driving it. They certainly are, but consumers are a little bit too.
I mean, as someone who got cajoled into the premium package on the car I bought, yeah, of course, I accept the blame. Thank you for handing it to me. My last question here is just there's no way this is going to reverse, right? Would we say the $25,000 car is gone for good?
It's never over till it's over. There are a couple of trends that started late last year that did suggest consumers were starting to get a little more budget oriented when it comes to buying cars. One example is the Nissan Sentra, which is still priced at under $25,000, at least for its base model. That had a 40% year over year increase in purchases. And Ford has increased production of its lower trim version of the F-150 for this year. So I think it's possible that we have reached that breaking point. But the other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, automakers, they want these pricier, high margin vehicles. And if they can just find a big enough market for that, they don't even have to worry about it. Whether there is enough consumers who want these cheap vehicles or not, they might just say, too bad, just go look at used cars. And that's essentially what they've been saying. So.
Yes, used cars, that's going great for everyone too.
Right, because those are now so expensive.
Yeah, we can do that another day, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot podcast network. Our editor today is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clark. We have a lot more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. So if you're not subscribed, please go get signed up at thehustle.co/email. And you can also follow us on Instagram at The Hustle Daily. We will see you tomorrow.
It's hard to remember now, but the internet used to be fun.
I can't believe how easy it is to surf the net. Surf's up.
On Long Shadow, Breaking the Internet, we'll trace how a tool that once fueled democracy
Opposition activists organized the march on Facebook.
became a weapon aimed at the very heart of it.
You're watching the unraveling of our democracy right now.
From Longlead and PRX, this is Long Shadow, Breaking the Internet. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, look, side hustles fail when they consume all of your time. I mean, every single bit of it. The pros, though, work smarter with AI doing all the heavy lifting. To help you out, we just dropped the Side Hustle Accelerator database. You can search your exact problem for your side hustle, grab the perfect prompt, and get results. If you're struggling with marketing, content, and customer service, it's all solved in just seconds. This isn't just another tool, guys. It's your unfair advantage in a spreadsheet. So stop asking AI the wrong questions and start scaling with what actually works. You can get it for free in the link in our show notes. And you can stop right now, actually. Why don't you take a look down at those show notes and tap the link? You don't want to sleep on this.